Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. It's news that's nightly about the Redskins. Welcome to the Redskins Nightly News. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So, the Redskins are a funny team, an interesting team right now. And it's a couple of things I want to touch on for the lead story, a couple co-leads let's go with. The first thing that I want to talk about is where the Redskins are in the pecking order and pantheon of this league. Right now, as we sit here, going into week 14 of the 2019 National Football League season, the Redskins are the epitome of rock bottom. Now, when you look at the record, 3-9, there's a bunch of 3-9 teams around the league. What makes the Redskins any different than those teams? Hell, there's a 2-10 team in the Giants and a 1-11 team in Cincinnati. Why are the Redskins any worse than those teams? They got worse records than the Redskins statistically. Well, it seems like no one wants to lose to the Redskins. Rightfully so, okay? I get that. But it seems like when they do actually lose to the Redskins, teams, you overreact because remember once upon a time I would always tell you guys over and over and over again, stop circling teams on the calendar as if we've got it like that. Remember, I would always tell you that? Like, we're not good enough to circle anybody on the calendar. We can't look at the schedule and say, man, there's Arizona. We should be able to beat them. Man, there's Buffalo. Got to beat them. Look at Detroit. We should beat them. Hey, Cincinnati, we know they're going to stink. We should win that game. We aren't good enough to do that. And over the last few years, there's been this dramatic switch where now we are, and I told you guys this a long time ago. I said, you know what? You guys better stop doing it. As a matter of fact, teams are looking at us like food. You remember me telling you guys that? Teams are looking at us like food, and they want to eat against us. And they're circling us on the calendar, and they're saying, we better beat them, or else, ... Well, now we've officially become bottom feeders in this league, where teams fully expect to beat the Redskins. And if they don't, it's their rock bottom, okay? So we've become the team that if you don't beat them, you've officially hit your rock bottom. I talked about this. I sent out a tweet, and I retweeted John Kimes' tweet after we beat the Lions. Remember, we were 1-9. Hadn't won a game since we beat the Miami Dolphins by a single point when they were winless and looked hopeless. And there wasn't any hope in sight. We were a downtrodden franchise, and we looked like we were heading for a franchise worst 1-15, possibly 2-14. Well, Redskins beat the Detroit Lions, and the newspaper in Detroit, one of the newspapers in Detroit, had a heading, as you can see on the screen right now, of rock bottom. And John Keim tweeted it out. I retweeted it. I got a chuckle out of it. And there are actually people in Detroit advocating, because the very next week when the Lions were to play, it was going to be a Thanksgiving contest. And there were people actually advocating that the Lions boycott Thanksgiving. They're not worthy of playing on Thanksgiving because they lost to the Redskins. They shouldn't play in that Thursday game. That's how bad it was to lose to the Redskins. You fast forward another week. The Redskins defeat the Carolina Panthers. Keep in mind, the Panthers came into the game at 5-6, and they weren't mathematically eliminated from the postseason. And their owner, the week previous, after a tough loss on the road at New Orleans, came out and said, we're evaluating everyone. No one's safe. GM, head coach, hell, even Cam Newton. We don't know the futures of any of these guys, but we're not going to make any drastic moves at this time. Fast forward a week, they lose to the Redskins, and all of a sudden, Ron Rivera is fired. Breaking news, Ron Rivera is fired. Okay? The Redskins did that. The Redskins beating Ron Rivera and the Carolina Panthers got him axed. Okay? In Carolina. And that's where we are as a franchise. I need you to understand that's who we are as an organization right now. You lose to the Redskins, things must change, all right? Heads must roll. You've officially hit rock bottom if you lose to us. I'd like to see that change in the near future, okay? That's not a badge of honor, okay? Just so you know. All right, but the other co-lead story is one where I'm trying to unite the fan base, because on one end of the spectrum, you've got fans that want to lose out, yeah, because of Bruce. But I think we can all agree right now, and I'm going to say this, and I don't know this to be the truth. We have buffoons running the operation, so it could literally be coming down to these final 4 games as to whether Bruce comes back or not. But let's be brutally honest with ourselves. If Bruce's tenure in Washington is hanging in the balance on whether the Redskins finish strong in these final 4 games or not, then we weren't close enough to getting him out of the door in the first place. All right. It's asinine to think that almost a decade worth of futility is hanging in the balance over whether the Redskins finish 2-2 down the stretch for a grand total of 4-2 in their final 6 games. Like, that's dumb. If Bruce isn't getting fired already, if Dan hasn't already made up his mind that at the end of the season, he's either going to part ways with Bruce, whether he retires and sails off into the sunset, or he cans him, or whatever the case may be. If he hasn't already made up his mind, then shame on him, and we're in worse trouble than we think we're in, okay? Which, it won't be worse for me because I don't think he's getting fired in the first place. But I just said all of that to say this. These final 4 games of the season shouldn't determine whether Bruce is back or not. His ass should be fired already, okay? Should have been fired 5 years ago. So I don't care about winning and having that be an issue because Bruce might be back. I don't care about that. Now, I think the more realistic issue there in winning is that Bill Callahan starts to look good and Greg Minuski starts to look good, and all of a sudden, those guys could potentially be back. Now, that is probably a more realistic problem because those guys, if they find a way to, let's say, win 3 out of their final 4 games, and the Redskins finish up the season at 6-10, and all of a sudden you look up and you say, man, with Dwayne Haskins as the starter, the Redskins finished up the season pretty damn good at 5-3. And had he started the season earlier with Callahan and all of these guys back, with KOC as the offensive coordinator, who's to say that they're not able to do this at the beginning of the season and have it carry all the way through? And that's where you could get into a little bit of a dicey and murky situation with Callahan staying, because I do not want him back under any. I don't care if the Redskins run the damn table and get to 7-9. I don't want Greg Minuski nor Bill Callahan back under any circumstances. That's just how I feel. I can't speak for anybody else out there. But I'm trying to unite both ends of the fan base right now because there's like a little bit of a divide here where, hey, there's fans that want to win, want to kind of build a culture with these young players that suggest that winning is a good thing and that's what we need to continue to do. And you want to foster that environment by winning football games. And then there's the other faction of the fan base that's like, look, winning isn't going to change anything in the future. We stink. Let's get a high draft pick. Let's lose so that Bruce is definitely out of here. But more importantly, that we can get a guy like Chase Young on this football team. So here's my thought process. The Redskins currently hold the 3rd overall pick. All right. I was looking at a bunch of different draft boards and I was looking at a bunch of different statistics. Redskins right now have a 6.7 chance to end up with the 1st overall pick. I honestly think it's even less than that. I don't see any way, shape, or form the Redskins find a way to finish before Cincinnati. I think the Bengals, even though they got Andy Dalton back and they're probably going to win at least one more game, I don't see them winning, 4 games or, down the three games down the stretch, or winning 2 more for that matter. But as I've said all along, with all these bad teams, every single one of them has had a 2-game win streak at some point this season. Maybe Cincinnati's time is now. And all of a sudden, we could be having a different conversation. If they go to Cleveland this weekend, win, Redskins fall at Green Bay, and all of a sudden, you look up and you're 1 game back of the number 1 overall pick. So we'll see what happens. But I look at it like this. The Redskins have a 62% chance right now of gaining a top 5 pick. I think it's very realistic that happens. And when you look at the other teams around, look, it's a cluster F at 3 and 4 wins. So you could easily win 2 games and not be in the top 10 in this draft. That's the reality. I told you this is the worst season to be a bad team because there's so many bad teams in the league this season. There's a huge discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots. And I don't know if there's been this big of a gap in quite some time. Normally, the middle of the pack is where everyone is, and then there are a couple of outliers that really stink, and then there are a couple of outliers that are really good. This year, there's a bunch of good teams, especially in the NFC. There are a bunch of bad teams, and the teams in the middle, is shrinking. It's almost like the middle class in this country. The middle class is shrinking in the NFL as well. You either are really good or you really stink. So right now, the Redskins are among 9 teams that either have 3 or 4 wins. The Redskins are one of 5 teams with 3 wins. The other 4 teams are Arizona, Detroit, Miami, and Atlanta. So when you look at those teams, I don't really worry about Detroit or Arizona. Both of them have a tie. So if we finish tied with them in terms of wins, they're going to finish ahead of us statistically because of that tie. So I don't really worry about those two. I'm more concerned with Atlanta and Miami. And when I look at both of those teams, I expect them to at least win one more game, okay? So the way I see it, look, Atlanta's got Carolina this week at home, a team they've already beaten, and they've got a new head coach, and their interim head coach stinks. I fully expect Atlanta to win this week. So I expect Atlanta to win at least one more. They possibly could win 2 more games. Miami, same thing. They're playing the Jets this week. You telling me they can't beat the Jets with Fitty at quarterback? Yeah, right. And they have the Giants too. And they have Cincinnati. They're going to win another game. So I look at them and I say, they're going to win another game as well. And if both of those teams win another game, guess what? We're still going to be higher in the draft seeding than them. So I'm not really worried about the teams with us. Those 4-win teams, I'm not concerned about them either. Jacksonville, Chargers, Broncos, and the Jets. All of those teams are going to finish ahead of us in the standings. And honestly, all of them could win at least one more game. I know Denver and the Chargers are going to win at least one more game for sure. Jacksonville's probably going to win one more game. And I don't know about the Jets, but it doesn't matter. They're going to finish ahead of us. So I'm not really concerned about the group around us per se. I'm just really more concerned about the Giants behind us. I'd like to get in front of them because if the Giants finish ahead of us in the draft standings, guess what? They're taking Chase Young, okay? I don't worry about Cincinnati because they're going to take a quarterback. Yeah, they've got a decision to make, but if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance in this league. I think Andy Dalton's gone after this year, and I think they're going to go ahead and move on and take the quarterback. You can't squander that opportunity. When you've got the number 1 overall pick, you've either got to do one or two things. You've either got to trade it and amass a bunch of draft capital to speed up your rebuilding process, or you've got to take a quarterback if you don't have one. But you can't assume that you're going to be at number 1 again. So you've got to take advantage of that opportunity. They're going to take a quarterback. But that number 2 pick, if the Giants are there, they've already got their quarterback. So now it becomes Chase Young. And it's a no-brainer. So I'd like to get in front of them. But I said all of that to say this. The reason why I brought this up is because I think you can still win and still achieve a high draft pick. It's what I'm trying to get across to you guys. Like, we don't have to lose to end up with the 3rd pick in the draft. And if we don't get Chase Young, so what? It's okay. We still need left tackle help. We'll be in a great position to take the first left tackle off the board. We could use a elite corner if the Redskins want to go in that direction. There'll be other guys available at other positions that the Redskins desperately need, like wide receiver, that will be available for us at the pick wherever we are, 3rd, 4th, 5th, wherever we end up. And so what I'm trying to do is tell you guys, it's okay to win, and we're still going to end up with a high enough draft pick. Now, if the Redskins get freaky and want to win 3 out of their final 4, now we're having a different discussion because we could leapfrog all of these 3 and 4 win teams and end up with the 11th pick in the draft. That would probably be the worst case scenario possible, honestly speaking, because you end up with 6 wins and all of these teams that we just talked about end up with 5 or less. And now all of a sudden you're on the outside looking in after being so bad all season long. We'd pretty much be where we've been the last 2 years when we've selected. 2 years ago when we took Jonathan Allen, or 3 years ago when we took Jonathan Allen, we were, the 17th pick, I believe, 16th, something like that. 2 years ago when we took Daron Payne, we were 13th, if I'm not mistaken. And then last year when we took Dwayne Haskins, we were 15th. So that's pretty much where we've been. And I don't want to be there. Our record this year, unlike past years where we deserve to be in the middle of the pack, that's not what we've been this season. We've been among the worst. We need to be drafting as such. So hopefully the Redskins don't all of a sudden decide they want to get hot, win 3 out of the final 4, and all of a sudden here we are drafting 11th overall. And now we don't get the first tackle off the board. We don't end up with a blue chip edge rusher and 2 out of the 3 big time wide receiver. And this is going to be a deep wide receiver draft class anyway. But You'd like to get the guy you deem to be the best. You don't want to settle for table scraps. And I don't even think there's going to be table scraps in this draft. There are so many elite caliber wide receivers. It's not even funny. But anyway, I said all of that to say this. It's okay. We can do both. Okay? So let's get into in other news. And this is a simple in other news. I talked about Carolina firing their head coach, Ron Rivera. I just got a couple of questions for the social media maneuvers today. And let's start out with that one. Carolina fired Ron Rivera. Would you be interested in him here in Washington? All right. I want to hear from you guys. Leave it in the comment section. Ron Rivera is now available to be a head coach. He's going to land on his feet. He's going to get another job. I'm hearing people talk about him becoming a defensive coordinator. If you've got that kind of skin in the game where you've been a head coach for 9 straight years, there's no way you take a coordinator job. Now, I don't know what was left contractually for him, because if he's got another year left due to him, he could sit out of football next year, take a year off to spend time with his family, and then come back and be a really hot name next year. Or if he doesn't have another year and he was a lame duck coach and he needs to continue to have revenue, generating and he wants to have income coming in, he could go right back into the pot and try to, get a head coaching job right now. And if he doesn't, maybe he becomes a coordinator. When you've been a coordinator, jobs for guys that were head coaches are generally for the guys that didn't work out after 3 or 4 years. They didn't make it out of that first deal. And so they got to go back and cut their teeth as a coordinator again and get another opportunity as a head coach. But Ron Rivera has earned the right. He went to a Super Bowl. There aren't many coaches in this league that can say they've actually coached their team to a 15-1 mark and a trip to the Super Bowl. They didn't win it, but they got to the Super Bowl. He's getting another job. So would you want that job to be here in Washington? I'll give you my take on that tomorrow. I don't want to sway anybody's decision with what I think. I want to hear from you guys. Would you be interested in Ron Rivera signing here to be the Redskins' next head coach? Also, what I want to ask, perfect time, I think, after the Redskins have played so well on offense. Well, not so well. The Redskins played well on offense last week. Who are the offensive untouchables for you on this Redskins roster? I will have the answer to that for me tomorrow as well. So I'll give you my Redskins untouchables on the offensive side of football. We've already done it with the defense. Now I need you to give me your offensive untouchables. Leave it down in the comment section. Looking forward to reading your comments to see if we match up with our untouchables. And then lastly, I want to throw this out there. Morgan Moses said that on his radio spot that he does with the Junkies every single week, he said that, had back spasms, flare up, had a back issue. He said that it was actually due to Darius Geis leaping over on his first touchdown run over the pile and spearing him with his helmet. And he came over to the sideline as the Redskins went for 2. He tried to turn and pivot on his pass drop, and he said his legs went numb. He couldn't feel his legs. So he came over to the sidelines and he said to Geis, "Hey man, what the hell, bro? You goddamn pinched a nerve in my back." And he's like, "Yo, that was the only way I could get in the end zone. I'm sorry." So, shit happens. It's football. These things happen. And so he didn't play the remainder of the game. And he said he's going to play. He said he's going to be okay. He's going to get some treatment. And he said he wants to get a couple of practices under his belt this week, but that he should be ready to go for Green Bay. Look, he's our longest tenured streak, active consecutive start streak after Kerrigan missed the game last week with his concussion. Morgan Moses is now the leader in the clubhouse in terms of consecutive starts for the Washington Redskins. So it'll be interesting to see if he can keep his streak going this weekend at Green Bay. And last little tidbit before we go, I talked about Ron Rivera getting fired in Carolina. Guess who is a 14-1 odds on favorite to be the next head coach of the Carolina Panthers? Yep. You guessed it, Jay Gruden. Now, I heard a lot of the complaints that the Panthers fans had about Ron Rivera, and my man Syndico did a great job of kind of outlining the charges that were levied against Ron Rivera as to why he was dismissed. And among those were didn't make in-game adjustments, poor clock management, poor game manager, ran the same plays over and over. And does that sound familiar to you? So I'm like, if you're a Panthers fan and you think it's a good idea to hire Jay Gruden, and those were your comments and those were your concerns about Ron Rivera, you're probably in the wrong market for a head coach. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. But in any event, that's going to do it for me, your man, Louie T. Make sure you leave it in the comment section. All right. Ron Rivera, interested in him or not? And also, another comment on the Redskins' offensive untouchables. Guys that you would absolutely have back on this roster as we head into 2020 and wouldn't want them exposed to free agency or anybody else being able to poach them off of our roster. Who are your Redskins offensive untouchables? And make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the Louie T Network if you haven't already done so. And also, make sure you share this video if at all possible. And check out the Louie T Network podcast, as that is available on every single platform that you could think of. Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and of course the website louietnetwork.net. I'm your man Louie T, signing off. Remember, we got skin in the game. Why? Because we're Skins fans for life. This has been the Redskins Nightly News. I'm your man Louie T. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.
Louie T Network.